Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Home of the Canes podcast. I am your host for today, Jack Horowitz, alongside Alex Donno. Today, we're going to be discussing this week's news about the University of Miami football team and just a great week for commitments. Obviously, our big news this week was Elija Lofton committed to Miami. Obviously Elija was the number one player in Nevada. Who do you draw comparisons of him to in the NFL? I saw Brevin Jordan. I saw Pitts.
Yeah, I think Brevin Jordan is where you start, Jack. And hello, and thank you so much for having me. There's a lot to compare there with Brevin Jordan. You know, the two of them, they didn't go to high school together, but they do go to the same high school. And I think there is a bit of a relationship there. And I know Brevin was very congratulatory to see Elija decide to commit to Miami and take his talents down to Coral Gables. And, for me, I think it's easy to try and compare Elija Lofton to certain players, but I think maybe within the next 4 or 5 years, people are going to start to wonder who the next Elija Lofton is. Because I think what makes that player really unique and special at tight end is he can do a little bit of everything. Because a lot of times when you have tight ends coming out of high school, even coming out of college, you'll say, oh, this is a receiving tight end. This is a blocking tight end. Elija is all of the above. He's a really good and active blocker. He's also a reliable pass catcher who runs really good routes. And so I think this is someone who can, he can either pick up first downs for you, score touchdowns for you, or he can also help open up holes for your running backs and help protect your quarterback. So you don't really have to take this guy off the field, which I love.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely in his highlight tapes, we saw those blocking highlights, which really sets him from everyone else. We kind of draw comparisons to George Kittle in the sense of just a great blocking tight end and could do anything. Not the biggest guy, but you really need that blocking nowadays for tight ends, especially with the running backs that could be coming in to and that we have. Another huge rumor this week, Justin Scott coming to the 5-star DT out of Chicago. If we got Justin Scott, would this Miami defense be the best in the ACC?
Well, for one thing, if you can get Justin Scott verbally committed, I think that would help you land other big time players. Like if you can land Justin Scott, then I think you start to look at, okay, Colin Simmons, he wanted to be surrounded by talent, the 5-star defensive end, Dylan Stewart. I'm sure these guys all want to be surrounded by talent. Does that make David Stone, Aiden Breland more likely to want to come to Miami? That's number one. As far as best defense in the ACC, they would be up there. You'd be looking at, especially if you get multiple of the names that I mentioned, how good Miami's defensive line could be in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Everything starts up front, Jack. We all know how important it is to pressure quarterbacks, to stop the run, to make these plays behind the line of scrimmage. Then you can start hopefully talking about Miami the same way you talk about Clemson's defense for the last 10, 12 years, and the way you talk about Florida State's defense, who had a good season and a lot of talented players last year. So I think that could put Miami right in the mix. And yeah, I think, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, even if you land a guy like Justin Scott, that can set you up to have the best defense in the ACC.
And that would be huge because Miami would be like almost the Georgia of the ACC, because obviously we got Leonard Taylor, Thomas Gore, and just adding Justin Scott would add another beast to that line. And then up top we got Cameron Kinchins, who, if he could repeat last year, I think we're good to go. On the defensive side, I think it's the offensive side to worry about.
Yeah, and the offense as well. A lot of that in terms of recruiting is going to depend on how they play this year. It's something we say a lot on Locked On Canes that, if you're wanting to get more of these 4-star and 5-star receivers, Miami seems to be doing pretty well at running back and tight end. But if you want to appeal to more of the blue chip receivers and more of the blue chip quarterbacks, because I think that's going to be an area they really look to address in 2025. I think they're going to be active recruiting quarterbacks. You've got to show progress this year from your offense. But listen, you go back to the great Canes teams of the 80s and 90s. The defense used to kick their butts in practice. Like the offenses used to, not score a whole lot of points in practice, and they look pretty good on Saturdays against other teams. But against their own teammates on defense, they never look too good. So it starts with the D.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of defense, I don't know if this was last week or a little before, but we got Cameron Pruitt, the 5-star safety, who's a big commitment in this class. Very like explosive hybrid guy, kind of like Isaiah Simmons from Clemson in the NFL. Can play that safety or linebacker. What do you think he's going to add to this secondary with Kinchins and Pruitt?
Yeah, first of all, you talk about the versatility. I think that's another thing. You know, I mentioned Elijah Lofton on offense, his versatility. Cam Pruitt is another one of those guys. I mean, I could definitely see him maybe kind of the first area to target for him would be linebacker, because he was primarily being recruited as a linebacker, but he has that ability to play in the defensive secondary. And he's one of those guys where the highlight tape really pops on him. It kind of reminds you of some of the old school, you know, Miami linebackers and safeties. Like that guy hits you and you're going to feel it the next morning, and you're going to remember it when you go up against Miami. Like, oh, if that Pruitt guy hits me, I'm in trouble again.
Like a Sean Taylor almost.
Yep.
Before we get to the offensive side, are there any recruits you're looking out for this week on your radar for the defense, or we're just going to have to see how it plays out?
Yeah, Jalen Hayward, a defensive back who is verbally committed to Georgia, who's going to be on campus this week, is one that I'm definitely looking at on the defensive side of the football. And, you know, anytime we're talking about some of these guys like Hayward, or, you know, another Georgia verbal commit, Ellis Robinson, the fourth, who's, you know, the top cornerback in the class. He visited a couple weeks ago, just a little over a week ago. You know, it's just kind of about building those relationships, chopping wood, we call it, just making a little bit of progress little by little. And you hope, you know, once the season comes around, that you can flip guys with this. There's also a linebacker that I really like. It seems like Miami might be a little bit behind for him at this point, but Dylan Williams, 4-star linebacker out of Long Beach Poly, Snoop Dogg's alma mater in Southern California. He's going to be visiting. I seem to hear a little bit more buzz about Chris Cole, who's also visiting this weekend. He's a 4-star linebacker out of Virginia. He has family ties to Miami. He's Rohan Marley's nephew. He's Bob Marley's grandson. He's a really good player. Miami probably maybe a little bit more in the thick of it with him than they are with Dylan Williams. But yeah, there's going to be good defensive players on campus again this week as well.
And, you know, Jaden Jackson from IMG.
Yeah, he just visited this past week. And it seems like Miami is in a tight battle with Ohio State and Florida for him. It sounds like they made some progress with Jaden, who's a really good, I mean, depending on which service you look at, he's either a high 3-star or a lower 4-star, but a really good defensive tackle out of IMG. And, you know, if Miami can't make an impression on him, I don't know who can, because he's got a lot of his friends who he played with last year, like the Jaden Waynes and the Francis Maui-Goas and Riley Williams, Antonio Tripp, he was teammates with at IMG, who are all at Miami now. So that's definitely a player I would like to have. And the Hurricanes have, they've got a lot. They're in like the finalist groups for a lot of different defensive linemen out. And that's one that I really like a lot as well.
Yeah, for sure. And if he does go to Ohio State, we still have that 70% chance at Justin Scott. So now turning it over to the offensive side of the ball, we saw Kevin Riley this week, the 4-star back. I saw him as a great power and speed combo, almost like a Duke Johnson, obviously big Hurricane guy. And with the after contact skills, who does he kind of remind you of?
Duke is a good one. And, you know, it's fun. I'm going to give this to you as an exclusive, because I was told this, and I haven't said this yet on Locked On Canes, but a friend of mine who does a lot of scouting in his walk, because I've only seen his tape. I've never watched him in person. I know someone who has, and he actually said that Kevin Riley reminds him of Clinton Portis. So that's obviously, you know, Miami fans will love to hear that. It also puts a lot of pressure on him. Yeah. If he does become a Cane. So, you know, I want him to pave his own way and make his own legacy, but he's really a complete back. You know, he's probably not as powerful as Mark Fletcher, who's coming in this year, but he's going to kind of, if he does end up picking Miami, Riley would kind of fill the Mark Fletcher role in this year's class, and Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, who's a burner and a real fast running back, would kind of fill the Chris Johnson role. So they're looking to create that sort of a combination again at running back for this class.
Yeah, and definitely the Chris Humphrey and Kevin Riley class would be an amazing running back class this year. And then to finish off the week, Derek Plazz obviously visited on Saturday, the former Penn State commit, one of the best offensive linemen in the country, just a great athlete, 6'5", 280, and adds like a ton of raw power and strength to the offensive line. I think it would be amazing if we could get him. What are your thoughts on Plazz?
The staff likes him a lot, which, you know, that tells me everything. And I think if he was maybe a little bit heavier right now, he'd probably be a 4-star. But I always look at when you've got somebody coming out of high school, he's not even finished with high school yet. So who knows how much he's going to weigh like a year from now. But I think he's around like 265 or something, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure they're going to want to, you know, slap 30 pounds or so of size and muscle on him. But the technique is there with Plazz. And I know that this is someone that Alex Mirabal, Miami's O-line coach, believes in, and he tends to do a pretty good job finding diamonds in the rough at those positions. And you know, he was, like you mentioned, he was a Penn State commit for a hot second, and I think he realized he rushed into that decision. He made that decision too quickly, and now he just visited Miami and had a really good visit. I think Miami and NC State are the two teams that are battling for him, and he's going to be at North Carolina State visiting this weekend. So I mean, right now I think it's fair to say Miami is the favorite, but obviously when he goes on his OV to NC State, that could change. So we're just going to have to see how that official visit goes, and hopefully this one ends up being a cane.
Yeah, that would be huge. And before we end the show this week, do you think there's any positions specifically that the cane should be going out for, or should we just stick to the defensive line guys, offensive line guys, or is there any positions we need to focus on more?
Well, they're definitely taking a swing at a big time wide receiver, because they are going to have arguably the top player in the class, Jeremiah Smith,
Right,
on an official visit this weekend. Now he is an Ohio State verbal commit, and Smith, he seems pretty solid to Ohio State. I mean, he's saying all the right things, he's tweeting all the right things, but he is taking visits to other places, so he's at least keeping an open mind. And he's a local guy at Chaminade, Madonna in South Florida. So he's going to be here for he's going to be on campus for a full official visit between the 23rd and the 25th. So this coming weekend. And, you know, Miami's got to hit the visit out of the park. They've got to hit the visit out of the park, and then they got to try and win some games and score some points this coming season to try and flip him from Ohio State. So that's definitely someone they need to give him like the super VIP treatment, because he's, you know, one of the best players in the country, and they need to make him realize how important he could be to Miami's offense.
And to pair him with the Strepo, and that would be an amazing wide receiver duo. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I'll see you guys next Monday on House of Canes. Thank you.
Thank you.